You're listening to And the Plot Thickens, an Authors on the Air Radio Network podcast. Join your host, suspense and horror writer Jeff Crawford, as he explores the art of creating tension and mood with authors from a wide variety of genres. Find out more about Jeff and his books at authorjeffcrawford.com. And now, meet today's author guest.
Tonight's guest is not only one of the most talented writers working today, he is also an all-around good guy, a gentleman, and someone I'm fortunate enough to call friend. His books fairly drip with tension, and he's here today to tell us a little of how he does what he does so very well. Please welcome from the Lone Star State, Mr. Reavis Wortham.
Jeff, honored to be here. How are you doing, sir?
I'm doing great. It's been too long since we talked, and for this inaugural show, I can't imagine who I would have picked to be the first aside from you.
Well, you're very kind. Thank you so much. And I'm glad to be here. I love talking with folks, and I love to talk about writing.
Isn't it? It's the older I get, the more fun it is to talk about writing than it is to actually write sometimes.
Well, that's kind of like hunting, hunting and fishing. Sometimes as you get older, sometimes you want to take people out and let them enjoy the outdoors, and you just kind of be the guide for them.
That's it. And that's what's going to happen today. You're going to be our guide to telling us a little bit about your particular knack for writing suspense and dark and edgy and tension. So we want to jump right in and have a pretty spirited conversation about this specific, fairly narrow topic. Tension or suspense in almost any book is nearly always necessary in some form or another at some point. How do you personally approach those parts of your book so that the reader sits up a little straighter and grips your book a little bit tighter as they read your words?
Wow. That's kind of a hard question to answer. And we'll kind of skip over the top of it like a rock on the surface of a pond, because there's a lot of things to discuss here. But number one, there's no right or wrong way to create tension. That's one of the first things that I learned. Each author, each writer has their own way of telling a story and spinning a story. The number one keeps you interested, but number two racks up a feeling of suspense or dread, and that's what tension is. It's dread that something is going to happen, and it varies in genres. If I'm writing a mystery, we don't know who the bad guy is. That's the beauty of a mystery. It's the journey to find who that individual is that doing all the bad deeds. And so what our protagonist usually does is skip along, looking for the clues, looking to find out what's going on, and we see that in their actions and their dialogue and in the locations. And sometimes our protagonist might brush shoulders with the antagonist. They might find something that they don't understand that we will, as the reader would see. That it's kind of like one of those things in the movies. Oh, for the love of God, don't open that door. We know something is behind it, but we have to open the door to find out what's back there, and that's that feeling of dread. How many times do you have any of us gotten up in the middle of the night, we hear a strange sound, and go through the house wondering where that sound came from, and maybe open that door to look in that room, but what if something is in there? Or what if someone is in there? So that's how it works in a mystery. In a thriller, and I write both. I write my Red River mystery series set back in the 1960s, and I also write contemporary thrillers. The Sonny and Hawke series, for example, that just wrapped up, the 4-book series. They are contemporary Western series set down in the Big Bend region of West Texas. And these are thrillers. We know who the bad guy is. But now our energy is amped up because we're after that guy. We're rocketing toward a conclusion. We know who the bad guy is, but now we want to see how our protagonist will succeed and overcome everything that's thrown in his way. And that's what writers do. They throw obstacles in the way of their protagonists as they chase down the bad guys and try to find some resolution.
Yeah, you're right. And you brought up a great word a while ago that I never had I've used it a few times, but I never had thought about it in connection with this subject, and that was dread. And as you were talking, I was thinking there are so many things that I've built up in different books that I've done, and you can all go back to the root of dread. And that was a great point that you brought up, and I appreciate that. When you're talking about creating tension or discomfort, what is the best for you, or the easiest for you, or maybe just your favorite, to try to get that across to somebody? Is it the setting of where they're at? Is it a presentation of facts? Is it environment? Or is it just vagueness? If you don't ever show anything but the edges, what's a good tool for you?
Well, and you just listed all of it. It's the thing that you see out of the corner of your eye that you cannot identify. And it's the thing that worries you. If you're afraid of spiders, oh, for crying out loud, we don't want spiders in there. We don't want spiders crawling on us. If it's snakes, the same way. My second novel, Burrows, it deals in a very claustrophobic environment. The two individuals, Ned Parker, who's a constable in Northeast Texas, and his friend, Deputy John Washington, they enter a house that is packed solid with refuse. It's just a hoarder's dream, but it's a human nightmare. And the place is rife with tunnels and darkness and claustrophobia and snakes, rats, anything that would live inside of an abandoned house full of junk. And that preyed on everyone that read this book. I had people tell me they loved every moment of it. It's their favorite book of my series. I've had other people tell me I just almost couldn't get through it because of the claustrophobia. My editor, and this gets kind of to the creep factor here too. We're at a creep factor. There are spiders in there. There's snakes. There's spiders and roaches and rats that live in this kind of refuge. Plus my antagonist, who is a sociopath who lives in here and has the place booby trapped. But the one chapter that and this was my second book, one chapter that my editor asked me to take out, and today I wouldn't do it, but I was a starting writer. I wouldn't do it. But today I would leave in the chapter where John Washington, who is a big, almost mythical character, 6'6", deputy sheriff, built like Schwarzenegger. He's in this tight and close space, and he encounters a boa constrictor, or python. It actually is what was living in there, that was living on the rats in there. And he and Cody Parker had to fight that snake in an enclosed area as it tightened up on John and was crushing the life out of him. That was an intense scene. And they said it was too much with everything else. Today, I would say, no, we're going to leave it in there because it amped up that dread, it amped up that fear. And, sometimes your antagonist doesn't have to be human in that one chapter, in that one setting. It can be something else. It's not linear. It's not one bad guy, one good guy. It's the environment, as you mentioned. It's the world around us that also intrudes and creates that suspense that we have to deal with.
Well, yeah, I agree completely. I did a book not long ago where I made the antagonist about as crazy as I knew how to write him, and it still wasn't as bothersome as the rats that were in the place where they were at.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Just the feeling of a rat running up beside you when you can't move and licking you, decide whether he wanted to bite you or not. That would do more than drive you crazy than anything the antagonist did in the entire book. So yeah, I agree with you completely.
Yeah, well, everyone has their fears, and they also fear different kinds of people. We don't realize, or the average person does not realize, that they probably brush shoulders with a sociopath at the very least once a week. And maybe once a day. You pass people on the highway that have done bad things. And so your fear of who those people might be will also be a factor in what you're writing, or as a writer's basis for an individual. My Sonny Hawke characters, I have a horrific individual in there who kills people in just in a way that is hard to describe without getting into the detail of the book and here in this brief interview. But this individual also is so warped that they bury the victims to dig them up later and to display the spines and skulls. And people say, well, where'd you get that at? How'd you make that up? And I said, I didn't make it up. I know some people that worked south of the border in some of those letter companies that have seen some of the cartel murders down there. And I took what I saw down there and used it in my books. You know, I had an individual ask me I was on a panel at a conference down in Austin, Texas, at the Texas Book Festival. And after we finished our panel, I don't recall what it was about. The guy raised his hand and he said, aren't you afraid you're giving bad guys ideas when you use those in your books? And I told him, I said, not at all. They come up with this stuff that I use. I don't make all of it up. You know, they have their own ideas, not me. I'm not going to influence them.
Well, let me, that's funny. Let me ask you this. Even though by and large, you as a writer know what's coming on the next page, if you're doing your job correctly, do you feel the tension building the same way that the reader's going to feel it?
Well, that's a great question because, Jeff, I don't know what's happening on the next page. I don't outline. I don't plan ahead. When I put my fingers on the keyboard and read what's coming up on the screen, it's as if you were writing it and it's coming up on my screen. So I don't plan for anything. Any tension, anything that happens, and I don't like the word organically, but that's how it happens with what I'm writing. I write along, I follow the plot. It's as if I'm watching television and I'm writing down, or a movie, or I'm writing down what I'm seeing. I see it all in my head. So I surprise myself sometimes. And I have a lot of humor in my book. Sometimes I'll be laughing out loud. And my wife will say, what are you laughing at? Something I wrote. She goes, you wrote it. How can it be funny? Well, it came up. It just caught me by surprise, as does the tension in my books. And toward the end of most of my books, and here's the trick that I use, and I don't know a lot of people do it, as the action amps up, as the roller coaster reaches that crest and starts downward, my chapters become shorter and shorter. It's flicked from scene to scene, and those short chapters build in your mind, and now you want to read the next chapter. Now you want to read the next chapter. Oh, I finished that one. Now I want to read that one. And if you're laying in bed at 1 o'clock in the morning and you got 10, 15 chapters left, they're going to go fast, and you're going to get on that roller coaster and you're going to ride it out to the end. Yeah,
you're exactly right. I wish these interviews were set up to where I had like 2.5 hours, but I don't. They're intense. They're short. They're like your last chapters, and I hope they're just as memorable, and I think they will be. But before we get going, tell me a little bit about what you've got going and what you've got coming up, as well is not what you're writing, but as well as what you've got coming up from books that you've done before, and how the reader can find you, because I know they're going to be interested in that.
Oh yeah, you can find me in any way. You can type in my name, Reavis, Reavis Wortham, Wortham, in your search engine, and my books will come up. I have now 13 books published. I have my newest one, The Texas Job, just came out about 3 or 4 months ago, and it's getting great reviews from both professional reviewers and from readers. And it is set place in 1931 in the oil fields of Northeast Texas as the oil boom exploded out there. And it ramps up pretty quickly and winds up, the climax winds up in Hot Springs, Arkansas, which most people don't realize. Hot Springs in 1931 was the Las Vegas of this country. That's where all the gambling and prostitution and it was a hideout for criminals such as Al Capone, who would go down there and spend his downtime there in Hot Springs. So that one is out. My newest series, the Tucker Snow series, features a Texas stock agent, and that first novel will be out in 2023. Right now it's tentatively titled Gravel, but that might change. And then I'm working on the second one as we speak, plus a couple of Westerns, plus a standalone buddy book that takes place in 1971. So, I stay busy. There are a lot of words flowing out of this computer, but it's what I've always wanted to do.
Fantastic. I can't think of anybody that I want to see writing 4 books at one time so I can get them all. I totally flipped out when I read The Rock Hole, and then Laying Bones just blew me away. All those Parkers, they seem to me like people I knew, people I had grown up with, and I just associated very well with those. But I got to tell you, the X-Ranger is the one that's close to me. I love that guy. But Reavis, I can't thank you enough for being on here. Listeners, you've been listening to a very specific type conversation with a remarkable writer, Reavis Wortham. It's been my pleasure to bring him and his thoughts to you today. And I truly hope, Reavis, you'll come back and visit us again.
All you need to do is give me a call, Jeff. It's been a pleasure, sir.
Thank you, sir. I'm Jeff Crawford, and this has been The Plot Thickens. We are proudly part of the Authors on the Air Global Network. Find me on Instagram, Facebook, and at www.authorjeffcrawford.com. Hoping I'll see you right back here next time, which generally will be every other Wednesday. But because of some things that had to be navigated in May, we will bring you another show next week. Until then, enjoy a good book, let the author know you've read it, and thank you so much for tuning in. Good evening, Reavis.
Evening, sir.